welcome to Table Tennis Philosophy. I've got something a little different to talk about today. If you listen to the news, the radio, just the talk on the street, people talk a lot about living in their own bubble. And this might apply to table tennis in a way. In fact, I'm quite certain it does. If you're not hearing this term a lot, living in your own bubble means that you tend to be around people that think the same way you do, maybe look the same way you do, and grew up in the same way you did, or just not really being exposed to other cultures, other ways of thinking. If all your friends are Democrats, you may have a very democratic way of looking things and may think all those Republicans out there are crazy, and it could work the other way for sure. And one of the things I noticed, I haven't done a whole lot of travel around the world, but I have been to Japan, I've been to Sweden, briefly in Germany, spent a good bit of time in Mexico, enough to know that cultures are very different. What's perfectly acceptable in one place might be very rude in another. Just go ahead and leave your shoes on and walk into a Japanese house and see how that goes over. Fortunately, in my time of doing that, it was my daughter-in-law was kind to me, although my son informed me that we have rules in Japan, and leaving your shoes off as you go in the house is one of them for sure. But anyway, getting back to table tennis, if you are frequently playing the same people all the time, if you always play at the same club, you might have a bit of a skewed idea about what your abilities are, how you would stack up against players in different parts of the world, different styles, different clubs. It's one of the reasons I try to play a tournament every now and then. Even if it's a local tournament, it's different. They're going to see a few different players than I would normally see. And even if I play the same players that I've played before, maybe they've upped their game a little bit. And I know when I did a tournament in Florida not too long ago, I felt like the 1600 level players that I was seeing there were playing far better than 1600 level players in Georgia. Now that may just be my interpretation of it, but I think in reality some of those players did get re-rated and advanced after I had played them. But it also allowed me to see the style of play that I was using. Would that work against people other than the typical players that I see? And I have a fairly small world of table tennis. I play at my own training center with people that I'm coaching, have 2 or 3 people that I play here on a regular basis, and we pretty well know our games inside and out. And we might be playing at a really decent level of play, but it is just against each other. And even if the players that I'm playing at times are playing very, very well, it's not the same as going into a tournament and seeing a higher rated player who I've never seen. I'm gonna have to figure their game out, hopefully in the first game, hopefully in the first few points. Of course, they're gonna have to figure my game out too. So that makes it a little different. One of the things you'll also see is a lot of times people will avoid playing long pips players. They're like, oh, why should I play long pips players? I don't like playing long pips players. I think it's wrong that they are able to use a rubber that changes the spin on the ball so easily. And I don't have a lot of long pips players in my neighborhood, and the ones that are there I'm going to avoid. Of course, obviously I think that's short-sighted, especially if you're planning on playing in tournaments. You're going to need to know how to play against those types of players. You don't want to be forced into playing those types on the times when you would most hope to be successful. I mean, I've known players who avoided long pips players, just as much as possible, go to a tournament and 3 people in their group are using long pips. It happens. And of course, I went to a tournament in North Carolina so a number of years ago, really got the impression that players were boosting their rubber much more than I saw in my corner of the United States, and that made for a little different experience than I was expecting. So if you're living in your own table tennis bubble and you're playing the same people all the time, you need to find ways to break out of it. Take every advantage to play new players. If you got a new player in town, try to play them as often as possible. Get a variety of different players. I would encourage you to play not just players that are at your level, but players that you could probably easily beat and players that could easily beat you. You're going to learn something from all of those types. So you don't want to limit yourself. In fact, sometimes you learn more playing some of the weaker players than you would ever expect. You can develop strokes that you can gain confidence with that you then can use against the better players. So there's a lot of ways that people live in their own bubble, and table tennis is an example of very much that. Like I said, I'm from the southern part of the United States, and apparently the expectation of people living in Georgia is that we're all characters from the Dukes of Hazzard show, that we're riding around with cars with Confederate flags on them, and I would I would defend against that stereotype. It's not that way at all. Atlanta is got some of the is one of the most diverse cities probably in the United States and maybe in the world, and you might come across a Confederate flag every now and then, and that's maybe part of living in the South, but it's certainly not the norm. And you'll find very intelligent people, very good table tennis players in this area, and so hope that gives you something to think about. Whatever you do, don't just play in your own table tennis bubble. Get out there and find some different types of players. All right, thanks a lot.